Right, I am sorry I cannot be in class with you today, but this should be good enough. If at any point during the video you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me. I will try to answer. I'm just homesick today. So our objective is we're going to be able to factor perfect square trinomials and difference of two squares. So we're factoring like we have been, but we are... there's like special ways to factor these, and it makes our lives easier. So you don't need to necessarily write this all down, but if at any point I'm going to quickly, you can pause the video, write down what you need to. So we're going to be factoring some trinomials by reversing the rules for multiplying special case binomials that we learned a while ago. So if you remember, when you have a plus b squared, you can write it out as a plus b times a plus b. Or you can think of it as we're squaring a, we're multiplying 2 times a times b, and then we're squaring b. Okay, and the same goes for a minus b squared. The only difference is that the 2ab will be minus instead of positive. Okay, so how to recognize a perfect square trinomial? You have to look for two things, and if both of these things are not there, then it's not going to be a perfect square trinomial. So the first thing you need to look for is the first and last term, like, are they perfect squares? So like if the first term's 4 and the last term is, trying to think, if I have, so if I have like 4x as my first term and 16 as my last term, okay? 4 and 16 are perfect squares. The middle term needs to be twice the product of one factor from the first term and one factor from the last term. So what that means is twice the product of the square root of each term. So like the middle term, this should be 4x squared. The middle term needs to be, so like the factor of 4, the square root is 2, and the square root of 16 is 4, okay? And 2 times 4 is 8, and then you need to double that. So my middle term needs to be 16. Okay? So that's how we need to, that's how you can recognize a perfect square trinomial. All right, so for example, this one. If we look at this trinomial, all right, is it a perfect square trinomial? It is, because our first term is 1, which is a perfect square, and our last term is 36, which is a perfect square. The square root of 1 is 1, the square root of 36 is 6, and if I multiply 1 times 6 and then double it, I get 12. All right, so it's a perfect square trinomial. So it should be super, super easy to factor, actually. So if I look down here, I'm going to look at the second one, because that has the minus 2ab, and this is a minus 12x. So all I have to do is I have to make it look like this, a minus b squared. All right, so the square root of 1 is 1, so I'm just going to put x minus. The square root of 36 is 6, so I'm going to write 6, and then I'm going to square that whole thing. So my answer is literally x minus 6 squared. And I'm done. Okay, again, you can, on this one, you can do the whole x thing and you can think of factors, but like, that's my answer, so it really shouldn't be that hard. Okay, let's try it again. The only difference of this one is that now we have plus 12x, right there. So this time, I'm going to use the first one and look at that one. So again, my square root, the square root of 1x squared is just x, right? If you remember, like, when you take the square root of something squared, they cancel out. That's why the first term is x. And there's only a 1 in front of it, so that's why it's 1x. And then the last term is 6. The square root of 6 again. but this time the middle term is adding, so I'm going to add 6, and then I'm going to square the whole thing. Like, that is my answer. Those of you that like shortcuts should like this. All right, I want you to try these two. Pause the video, try them without my help, check back in, and I will give you the answer. Do not just let the video keep going. Please try it first. All right, so for the first one here, we should have written x plus 3 squared. And for the second one, we should have written x minus 7 squared. All right. Good. Again, if you at any point you have questions and don't understand something, please email me. All right. So next. All right, so next take note of this. If you remember from 8.4, we had a really simple way of foiling these when I have a plus b and a minus b, and it just became a squared minus b squared. Okay, so when I'm doing this, I'm calling it factoring a difference of two squares. So this only works when you have a difference of two squares, and notice the word difference is in there. So that means when I'm subtracting two squares, this is the only time this method works. Okay, so if you look down here, that you can barely see it, I don't know why I cut it off, but a squared minus b squared, right? I have a squared is z squared, and b squared is 9 squared. No, sorry, is 9, right? And so if I have a squared minus b squared, I'm just going to write it. The first binomial is going to be a plus b. So again, the square root of both of these. So the square root of z squared is z. The square root of 9 is 3. A plus 3. And then my next binomial is going to be the same thing, except a minus 3, or z minus 3. And I have factored z squared minus 9. Super easily. Again, only when it's subtracting though. Okay, I want you to try these two real quick. Pause it, then check with me. Alright, so you should have paused the video, you should have tried them, and this should be your answers. You should have gotten v minus 10, or plus 10, and then v minus 10. I don't think it really matters which goes first, the plus or the minus, but I like to put plus first. And then the next one is k plus 4 and k minus 4. Alright, so pretty easy. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit different because now we have more terms in front of x. But it should not really make that much of a difference because I'm going to keep with my pattern. So this time a squared is 16x squared. So a itself, if I take the square root of that whole thing, will just be 4x. So my first thing I'm going to write is 4x. Then I'm going to write plus, and I'm going to write the square root of 81, which is 9. And then my next one will be 4x minus 9. Okay, again, super easy. It's just a matter of remembering the rule. All right, I want you to try this one, and I want you to think about the bottom question here. Pause it, try it. All right, so you should have gotten 5d plus 8 and 5d minus 8. And then you should have gone to this one and you should have realized that you cannot do this because it is not a difference of two squares. It will not work if I'm adding here. Okay, it will not work. So you need to make sure that it is a difference of two squares. In this case, you would have to do your X thing where you say, okay, so I have to multiply 25 and 64, and then I have to figure out what multiples are going to add up to 0. All right, so again, like always, we try our best to factor out a common factor if we can. So if we look at this, we can factor out a 6. Okay, so I'm going to start with factoring out a 6. And that leaves me with 4g squared minus 1. Okay, from here, this is a difference of two squares. 4 and 1 are both perfect squares. So I'm going to rewrite this as 6 times 2g plus 1 and 2g minus 1. Okay, the only difference is I took out a 6 because I wanted to make sure that it was a difference of two squares. All right, you try both of these. Pause the video, try both of these. All right, so for the first one, you should realize you can factor out a 12. And that leaves us with t squared minus 4. So then my answer would be 12 times t plus 2 and t minus 2. And then for this one, it's all the way back to the beginning of the video. I can factor out a 3, which leaves me with 4x squared plus 4 plus 1. Okay, I know this is a perfect square trinomial because the square root of 4 is 2, the square root of 1 is 1, 2 times 1 is 2, and if I double that, I get 4. Sorry, I missed the x. So I can rewrite this as 3 times, 2x, because I take the square root of the first term, plus 1, and I'm putting plus because it's plus 12x there, and then I square that because that's my rule. All right, here are your homework problems. I know it seems like a lot, but I only had a 13-minute video, so you should have plenty of time to get these done in class. If you have any questions, if you're still confused, please email me. I will try and help you the best I can.